Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 568.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because we are going to talk about something that I consider to be foundational, to be important, and I've often found that sometimes what you don't know can, has, and always will hurt you. Here's what I mean. There are many things that we've all been told that we just either assume them to be true. Maybe we don't know how to research if they're true. But sometimes when we find out this little nugget, it sets us on a completely different path, creates opportunity that we had never considered. And we wonder, why aren't more people shouting this from the rooftops? At this point, you're probably wondering, well, Jay, what are we talking about? Well, we're going to be talking about today the entire topic of self-directed accounts, like literally using a retirement plan to be able to choose, have more choice of what it is that you want to invest in. And I know many of you may be thinking, well, don't I have that already? Odds are probably not. And today's guest is definitely going to help us all get on the same page, because it's what we don't know that is actually holding you back. I have with me today none other than Dan Kryzanowski, and he is out there with Rocket Dollar. And what's exciting about these guys is what they're doing is that they're helping the real estate community leverage their retirement plan in all kinds of alternative assets, even self-storage, and who knows? We're going to ask some questions to find out what some of the craziest things that people have chosen to do with their funds are. And I think we're all going to learn a lot. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get ready to listen. We're going to get ready to learn and love Dan Kryzanowski. Dan, how are you doing?
Wonderful, Jay. Thank you so much for the kind intro. And I'm sharing love and hugs out to everybody. And I do feel, it's a wonderful, warm embrace that we'll have collectively after our discussion today.
So now, this being the first time that you're here, I have to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. So you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. So, Batman, Robin, Incredible Hulk, etc. You get the idea, because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, as an entrepreneur, I can envision myself flying around town, using our products and services, and saving our customers. That's what it can feel like. Also, though, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning too. So there's one by the name of Spider-Man, where he starts out as just a kid going to school, doing his thing, taking some photos, and then one day gets bit by a spider, discovers he's got a superhuman ability, and now he has to choose whether to use it for good or for evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before Rocket Dollar, before self-directed retirement plans, before even your time with GE Capital, etc., before all of the things that people know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Dan Kryzanowski?
Yeah, my superhero, I would call it my magic afro I had growing up in Scranton, PA.
Did you say magic afro?
When I was in my magic afro when I was in 8th grade. So
awesome.
Let me step back, and I'll preface to say my sister got the looks, the beauty, and brains. So two guys are not talking with her. My dad joked she would be like Gronkowski if she was a boy. But, for me, that said, though, I did have the benefit of touching 5'11" when I was about 13 years old. And I decided not to cut my hair for a year, which made it grow a little bit higher. And but also with tremendous, I'd say, just teamwork, grit, and coaching, and also wearing two different colored socks with the old school ones that you would pull up to your knee. Wow. Lo and behold, we pulled off an undefeated state championship in Pennsylvania. Now, my claim to fame, and I hope, first of all, I hope Kobe's listening, but if not, I was one level of separation away from beating Kobe. And why I say that is, in high school, the Philadelphia press said, hey, this other gentleman, Donnie Carr, is probably better than Kobe. One was in public, one was in private. And the word on the street in the mid-'90s was that, Donnie Carr was the bee's knees. So, basically, if it was Donnie or other people that eventually started in the Big Five schools across Philly, we just had the magic. I'll call it my superpower, or I should say our team's collective superpower, to be a bunch of just 6 foot and under kids from Scranton, PA, with a very, I'd say, loudmouth coach, a very dedicated coach to pull off, an undefeated state championship. So that I feel, and now that I'm bald here, of course, I can barely get off the ground, and maybe I'm looking for more of a cerebral sort of win at this stage in my life.
Totally understood. So as we go through this, I'm curious to know, how do we go from, the magical afro all the way to what we do today? Like, what was that journey like?
Yeah, so I feel like Dr. Evil a little bit here. I caught a clip on the TV on the plane last night. But what it is, I'm very blessed. I had a great life, and I'd say a very cookie cutter my first 30 years. So to keep it simple, I was born in 1978, graduated undergrad in 2000. I was fortunate to be guided by some of my uncles to go to Wharton, so did my undergrad at Wharton, traded for Merrill, did what I did. If I did on the debt side, I'd probably be calling you from my island today, but would have contributed to the financial crisis. So as I said, bad for the pocketbook, good for the soul. And, finished up a great master's program at Thunderbird. I've always had international aspirations, and a whole bunch of good things came out of that, including some time in the Bay Area. That was always on my bucket list, and meeting my wife in Mexico, of course, which was fantastic. So, pretty standard, following, I'd say, a quote-unquote normal path, or what was, my parents did and my, I'd say other Gen Xers did. And as many folks on the call know, we had a little bit of a shakeup, to put it mildly, in 2008. And from there, my antenna, really, really went up. And this is not to say I didn't do entrepreneurial stuff on the side, but it would be more for a social good. For example, starting a nonprofit or focusing on youth engagement, as opposed to, a true, we call it, say, tech startup. But right around 2008, I had the inkling to say, wearing khaki pants and, taking the train or being in Stamford, Connecticut, working for GE is probably not where I want to spend my next 30 years. So my wife and I, for the past decade, we've made it back to Austin, Texas. And I'd say from here, I've never been afraid to put my money where my mouth is, has been this entrepreneurial journey into, a fantastic experience of alternative investments.
So I guess the question then begs itself. There are many people who would love to have the pedigree that you just, mentioned. Why leave that environment?
Yeah, some of it is that there was I hate to say I had a crystal ball, but even looking at GE, the headline yesterday or a few days ago was that they're going to be cutting the pension. So although this doesn't affect me greatly, there was many folks that I think many times saw a better way, or maybe were forced to turn their head of, I don't want to say deep, HR violations, but let's just say it was a pretty heavy-handed environment. This wasn't GE, I think, across the country generationally, and that didn't sit well with me. I had a feeling that, if you treat folks with respect, you're open to innovation for trying things as opposed to a heavy-handed mistake. The good things would come out of it. So for me, I didn't see the likes of a GE or a larger company changing. And I felt I had to be in an environment where, folks actually encourage you to take risks, to do different things, to be in a much more collaborative as opposed to a very zero-sum environment. So that's, I think, my gut feel. In many ways, I feel that hypothesis has played out over the last decade. And a lot of it, although, I was fortunate to have, I'd say, great schooling, wonderful parents, great upbringing in Scranton, Pennsylvania. But ultimately, it's just that personal decision to say, am I going to be following everybody else, being led by fear, or having the confidence that, I am enough and I can do stuff on my own.
Interesting. So it was more of a choice to live closer to your values?
Definitely. Yeah. And as I said, I've always had, and I had the benefit in my, of my 20s to volunteer on the side, to mentor folks, to do stuff very, tangible that was helping people. But after a while, I realized as you grow the corporate ranks, there is a much heavier view of politics. And many times I can't blame some of the folks at the tail end of their career making, say, $500,000 in sales. Well, I probably wouldn't give that job up either if I had 3 kids in college. So, with that, I think I saw how much more how the real world tends to work as opposed to kind of this blissful thing, how it could. And now I feel I'm in the middle, but I've really chosen to, as I said, take back more of my time to focus on things that I am feeling very passionate about.
Got it. So lead us to why, in the position that you come from, you could have chosen anything. There's a reason that real estate called and you answered. Yeah,
so I had the benefit of, during my GE days being with GE Real Estate and also aviation. And it's funny, I would spin the globe around and say, where can we do a cargo port deal? So say where UPS flies into and drives out of. And that was very exciting to me. And then on a more micro, I would always, nerd out and say, well, how can I make the most of my 401k? And I would look at different bonds and CDs. And then lo and behold, in, probably about a decade or so ago, I'm co-best men in a friend's wedding. And, myself and this other gentleman are getting ready. And, we talk, what do you do? And he says, oh, I flip houses. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What is that? He gets into it and he says, if you want to put some money, you could. I'm like, that's great. What are you paying? He said, 15%. And I was like, whoa, this is awesome. It's not 15% today, but it's still really solid. And then the big light bulb moment for me, he said, did you know you can also use your retirement dollars? And for me, this was, I viewed myself, spending those, call it cold, quiet nights looking at Fidelity and, the limits, what would be on their portal versus, almost any transaction in the world, I would now be able to take back control of my retirement dollars to invest in. And either just for the black and white returns, but also just for, I'd say, the impact on community that I can shift over that I did not have in my liquid funds. For me, this was, I'd say one of those great revelation experiences. And then I had the benefits, you mentioned real estate also, outside of just giving hard money loans. I ended up with, on the 9 to 5 with Sparefoot, which was the hotels.com of self-storage and aggregator. I got to meet everybody in the industry. I kind of tagged who I felt was the top COO and CMO. And then coincidentally, a year later, they both decided to go on their own. So I've been a capital partner with Pinnacle Storage Properties also. And the one thing I think unconsciously as I've been, guiding folks raising money is sharing to say, hey, did you know you can use your retirement dollars? And the likes of a Pinnacle and other folks that take advantage of this, guess what? Lo and behold, 20% of their raise comes from retirement dollars. So as I see it, and I'll admit there's different benefits, or things that you don't get to receive on the tax side if you're using your checking account money versus retirement. But my big, on the whiteboard, I would say, I'm making 2 to 3% in some, call it conservative bond fund, and I can earn 10% with somebody that I trust to know, and I can look at the real estate. This makes perfect sense for me on the retirement side. So that's where I think my interest has continued from single family, multifamily storage, and other niche sort of sectors in real estate.
The interesting thing about this is how I can hear that understanding that you could use your retirement dollars became the unlock. And it was very similar for myself. I know all of my first transactions, in fact, definitely the first $5 million or so dollars that I ever raised. That's where it was. It was other people's retirement plans. I'm curious to hear what that transformational process was like for you, because like many people, we often hear how the money that's in a 401k or a Roth or what have you, that's for later. But you're saying it's for now, and there's probably people listening who are like, what do you mean, Dan?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, I'll try to joke a little bit here, but to say it's a lot like me. I mean, it's you probably haven't heard of it. It's been around since the 70s. It's legal, but once you get through the quirkiness, you're really, really going to want to, engage. And I think we see that here. So self-directed accounts, and this is capital S, capital D, not meaning that you trade some mutual funds on your platform. This is where you take full control of your retirement dollars, tax-free, meaning there's no additional taxes, penalty-free, meaning it's not an early withdrawal, and you're going from a handful of investments to, infinite number of investments that you can do with your retirement dollars. And then an added bonus for, I'd say, maybe even up to the 90% plus of folks on this call today that are not yet familiar, get used to checkbook control. So historically, it's been an old stodgy process where you might need a scanner, a fax machine, you name it, high fees, and God forbid you make a good investment, they would charge a higher asset under management. So, with that, I like to say for the last 50 years, it's been a necessary evil for folks made aware, but it hasn't been country club cool, to talk about, or something in the entrepreneurial scene. Because it's one thing to say, hey, I made this great investment, but someone says, how'd you do it? It's like, well, I was on the phone for 3 hours, had to fill this out, and this is the third time I give my best friend $50 for a hard money loan, and he ruined his weekend with his children because he had to worry about, taking a call with a random third-party customer service person. We at Rocket Dollar have completely eliminated all that friction, because what we want is for the 99% of, I'd even say, Americans making six figures, this is going to be your first touch point with self-directed accounts. And we've made it where we're leading with education, a world-class knowledge base that HubSpot promotes as one of the top in the world, a boatload every day almost, or other day we post new content or webinars from an educational standpoint to our blog. And then finally, the caliber of folks on our team are people that have been in this niche for the last decade or so, either having these accounts and or raising money. So you're talking to very qualified folks with hyper expertise. And the final point is there's no fine print. I mean, there's a one-time upfront and a flat $15 a month, and that's it. Whereas the other folks in the space are still, trying the old high fee, high touch, for fee Wall Street model.
So, okay, now being intimately familiar with a number of people who perform this particular service, I just want to make sure I heard something clearly, and at the same time underscore it for everyone else listening. I heard one-time fee and flat fee per month. So regardless of the number of transactions or the value of that's in the account, that stays the same.
Yes, that's exactly correct. So our core product, it's a one-time upfront of $360, and the folks, you stick around long enough, there might be a discount at the end of the call. But the point is, it's one time. It's a very, we feel reasonable amount. And then secondly, the big thing that you underscored, it is a flat $15 a month, regardless of asset size or how much money you move in or number of transactions you make. And finally, you're making these from a checkbook control. We never hold your money hostage, so to say. You have full access to your money at all times to invest in what you want, when you want.
Yeah, I noticed that I saw that. I was like, are they, because again, checkbook control is what we tend to, it's what I would want. And yet it seems as though that's almost the place you actually are preferring people to be, which I find also interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, so as I said, for most folks, somewhat familiar with this space, a lot of the other players offer the self-directed IRA. Why do they do that? It takes a little more work, and there's potentially more touch points with the old model, which they in turn have higher fees. We pulled back the curtain from the Wizard of Oz. The way that we arrange this for checkbook control is that you will have full access to your money at all times. And, even to the extent we realize in California how, LLCs can be pricey for folks that, let's say, hey, I have $25K in a Roth. I want to put it in my buddy's startup, set it and forget it. We have an arrangement, a certain type of structure that will not be potentially charging that, heavy $800 LLC fee to the state of California. Now, separately from all that, as you know, I've listened on your calls. A lot of folks are self-employed. The new term dualpreneur, or folks just doing some side gig, or maybe a very heavy entrepreneur. I share this because a greater percentage of Americans are now self-employed, and the huge benefit of being self-employed is that you are eligible for the solo 401k, also known as the individual 401k or EQRP. There's different names out there. But the main point here is that this, for folks that are self-employed, you can not only contribute 10 times as much that you could for an IRA, but by default, the account is a checkbook control with no LLC involved up front. So I know you're on the West Coast. Imagine there's a fair number of folks from California. So I'd say even with a little bit of self-employed income on the side, this is a very, very favorable account. And a final point, not to go too much in the weeds here, but in layperson's terms, you can have a pre-tax checking account and a post-tax Roth checking account under your umbrella of the solo 401k, under our one-time pricing of $15 a month, that you can, invest in quarterly if you want it to still be pre-tax, and then, you pay your tax in 60s or 70s, or, we call it the Facebook dream, that you pay, let's just say, on your $10,000 in taxes today in this Roth converted account. And then when it turns to $1 million, you don't pay taxes on the way out. So all of above is how we differed for the consumer experience, just in the structure of the product. And this doesn't even talk on our, I'd say, 99% customer satisfaction, our 5 minutes to sign up, or the other side of the coin is how we help people raising money.
Got it. Now, for the sake of everyone listening, I just want to underscore one particular thing. Some of you may have been under the impression, that a 401k or your retirement plan was actually the investment vehicle. And it's more the container. So if you can think of it that way, it's more the container that is holding the value, the cash, the asset, etc. And what we're talking about here with the people over at Rocket Dollar is all about, well, once you have it in the container, what it is that you're able to go then place, the where you're able to place the funds. So with that being said, Dan, there's some people who would say to you, if they could right now, but the people at my HR department said my 401k is already self-directed. What don't I understand? All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and I'm glad that you are enjoying what you are hearing thus far. But here's one of the things that's really important. One of the most important things that you can do is get started. One of the things that I've said before, and I say again, once you get started, stay started. But more importantly, there can be lots of roadblocks to getting started. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove one of those roadblocks for you and make it a little bit easier. Because the thing that I don't want to stop you is thinking, do I need a local number? How about a long distance number? Or should it be 800? How on earth am I going to make that happen so that people can contact me as I'm out there building my business, making my cash flow grow, but most importantly, understanding that it doesn't have to be difficult. Many of you may know, but if you don't, there's a company out there by the name of Grasshopper. And what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflow diary. Grasshopper is the entrepreneur's phone system. It works like a traditional phone system, but requires no hardware to purchase, no software to install. It's just a number that flat works. So if you are out there building that distributed workforce across many different locations, it's a way for you to still go out there and make your number be unified, simple, easy to use, something we've been using for quite some time. So again, go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflow diary. Now, let's get back to the rest of the story.
Sure. So your HR folks are right. With that, your 401k at your current company, and yes, if I looked at Webster's dictionary with a lowercase s, lowercase d, the fact that you have 10 choices, you are, grammatically speaking, self-directing, and they're correct. Now, that said, what you cannot do is something as simple as, hey, my friend's starting a company. They asked if I could do a small loan. You can't do that. I want to maybe get into a little crypto or Bitcoin. Probably not. I want to invest in my buddy that's just doing a duplex down the street. He's asking for shares of 25, 50K. You cannot do that. So the HR folks are not a knock on them, but this is just not available, and they're probably also not made aware because at the moment the large providers, generically speaking, the Fidelities of the world, it doesn't behoove them to have this, I think, offering. I just think things are too good, and they're just having too much money coming in a very easy way for them to consider offering what I call self-directed accounts, and then B, moving the education downstream to the likes of an HR manager. So, over time, I do feel there's going to be, just like anything, from call it sexual harassment in the workplace down, we are seeing this trend where, people want to, at the very least, be on equal footing from an education standpoint, or knowing what the rules are, knowing what the opportunities are. So, our hypothesis, swag, is that, self-directed accounts and hopefully Rocket Dollar, be known as the Charles Schwab of the 21st century, even within a decade or shorter. And I do see it as a possibility, as folks just want to, as I said, pull down all these curtains from the Wizards of Oz out there and at least have the awareness and education be out there, and then let people choose to do what they'd like.
Now, from the employer standpoint, one of the things that I have been personally cognizant of is the employers typically, if they're offering such a benefit like a 401k, retirement plan, etc., that they have a fiduciary responsibility, commitment, if you will, to make sure that the plan that they are offering includes all options or available. I've wondered this. I don't know. Is there any sort of additional liability from the employer's side, because a lot of the traditional plans that are not self-directed, as you say, capital S, capital D, because they're not offering the opportunity to put funds in the duplex, because you can't invest in a startup or any sort of digital assets. Does that put them at some sort of a risk?
No, not at all. I mean, so this is the general rule of thumb until you're 59 and a half is that you cannot touch your current company's 401k to move the money out without paying some sort of penalty, or if you're under, generally speaking, a health-related financial hardship. That said, most folks, I would imagine, on this call are on their second, third plus employer and probably have 2, 3 or more, we'll call it quote-unquote old 401ks or IRAs, sitting on the side. We half joke to, in the aggregate, this number is $10 trillion. So, for my friends from Philadelphia, this is the Rocky Balboa number, that actually goes up in the ring against our national debt. I mean, the person's old 401ks / IRAs total $10 trillion. And then behind that, as you said, it's the current employer plan. And then behind that, you have some military, say TSP money. And then behind that, all these self-employed folks. So, I won't guesstimate of what the final number will be, but let's just talk about the 10 that we know folks have sitting, not with their current employer. So to your initial question, the employers out there are in HR, there's no liability at all. I mean, this is just, as most folks, there's probably an opportunity to roll money in that I would strongly not suggest under any circumstance to your current employer's plan. And they don't push that heavy also. I think it's just something that is out there. But ultimately what we've seen, I'd say for a lot of, say, middle-age six-figure, even low six-figure earners out there, is that they have 2 or 3 of these quote-unquote old 401k IRAs. But once they're made aware of this, they can very easily roll over or transfer without penalty, and they generally tend to do $100,000 or more into, say, a real estate deal.
Got it. Makes sense. Now, through this process, I'm sure this has given you some, we'll call it unique insight into the things that people have a desire or places to actually place capital. I'm curious to hear some of the creativity that your clients have taught you.
Yeah, I mean, the fun stuff, of course, first is an oyster bar. Another one is, anything you see on crowdfunding these days. I'm guilty way back in the day of investing in a comedy tour. Wow. Good way to lose some money. But I would say that any sort of bar, restaurant, any sort of passion play, especially through a crowdfunding platform, the way it's set up, you have a much better chance of getting your money back if it's coming from year one revenue, if it's structured correctly, versus kind of the old school pie in the sky. You give one of your buddies something because they have an idea in an unstructured environment. I've not too much, I'd say sizzle, but I've had wonderful experiences with female entrepreneurs. A lot of them are giving back, doing something very tangible in their community. One was a window business, which was great. Another friend cured herself of type 2 diabetes, has a dynamic sort of story and blog that's going to be launched both in Spanish and English. So I'm very excited about that. And, the big thing here, I think you can read through the tea leaves, is at least what I see, and I think what folks see, particularly on their second, third, fourth investment, once the account is up, what they're doing here is they're either doubling down on the current place that they're investing, say it's somebody that does hard money loans for real estate, or they're branching out to their community. So to give a very, vanilla example with, say somebody puts $100,000 with storage and there's an 8% dividend, well, that $8,000 could go for, a peer-to-peer loan, maybe a restaurant down the street. There's a lot of things that come out of it that I think we're going to see more in the year 2020. We have a private Facebook group for our investors, and, the chit chat is kind of switching to this, or folks feeling, crypto for 5% of my IRA, that might be a pretty good bet. So we're seeing the shift, I think. I'll just put it this way. We're not seeing folks kind of turn around and double down on the stock market at this point.
Totally understood. Yeah. In fact, I'm beginning to see self-directed custodians like Rocket Dollar, etc., be able to offer access to digital assets. And you guys probably have the most number of relationships in that arena that I have seen. I'm curious to know if that was intentional or what.
It was, and let me preface that we're not a crowdfunding platform. We're not a deal shop. We're not a matchmaker. We never hold our account holders' money and do stuff for them or tell them what to do. That said, we do feel we have a responsibility, as you touched on it earlier in the show. Even 99% of folks are still unaware that this world exists. Mm-hmm. So outside of the very smooth user experience, just from the education point, we don't want to just say, hey, it's commercial real estate, that's it. No, of course not. So we show there's some gold plays, there's different crypto funds, there's something, one of our newest partners, Acre Trader, where you can buy, a percentage of a parcel of land, invest with Carl, where you can have a partial ownership in a share of a hedge fund. There's a lot of exciting stuff, and kind of with this foresight, obviously, most folks on the call, especially when you're how do you want to pay? Cash, checking, PayPal. What we've built and what we'll be launching with some partners, over the next few weeks is the Rocket Dollar API. So as you're saying, cool, this is a great crowdfunding. I like this sort of, real estate deal. And okay, great. How do you want to fund? With your checking account or with your retirement dollars? So it was a little bit field of dreams, but I think we've also, our CEO, last company, Goldman Sachs, that he founded, Goldman Sachs, bought about 18 months in. So in terms of building a foundation, we did a lot of these things in the first 18 months that, of course, it makes us very attractive for any other platform or, frankly, anybody that's raising money out there.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, because one of the challenge always has been the actual execution of the transaction, simplifying that process, reducing the confusion for all of the parties involved, has always been something that's, needed. And yet, and here you are doing exactly that. So that's beyond and exactly what the marketplace needs. Curious, though, when it comes down to not only the execution, there's something that you've mentioned a lot in terms of raising capital or helping people raise capital. Is there a specific focus at Rocket Dollar to help those of us who might be syndicators, et cetera, make that happen?
There is. So and I said the benefit myself and a lot of, especially the founders, we've raised X millions before by just simply informing folks, our audience, that, hey, did you know you can also use your retirement dollars? So, we're here in Austin, Texas. We call it the Texas two-step. Whatever you do as a deal sponsor syndicate on an ongoing basis, you're going to continue to do. So let's say you have a blog or a webinar where we can serve as a guest. Maybe you come on Rocket Your Dollar, our blog. So ultimately, to sum up, it's whatever you do on an ongoing basis. We're just another tool in your tool belt that's going to provide, I'd say, deeper engagement with your audience. And, ultimately, as we call it, 6 figures in 6 minutes.
What I think is interesting, though, and I hope people are hearing, is the challenges that I've dealt with and that many of you out there have dealt with are the very things you guys over at Rocket Dollar have decided to take on, to resolve, to make easier, so that in the digital age, those of us who may have an email list of, a lot of people, we can bring an opportunity to them in a way that we couldn't have before. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Dan, what you're saying is we still have to go through all the normal channels to get our deal and be what it needs to be. But when it comes time to the subscription process and all of this other stuff, or actually facilitating the transfer of the of the retirement plan from either where it is to where it needs to be, or even actually executing the funding of that particular deal, this is something you guys are bringing to the table to make faster and easier. It almost sounds like they can do it on their phone, the way you're talking.
We're pretty close to that. Yeah, I mean, it is true checkbook control. I mean, our partner bank, SDIRA Bank, they're FDIC insured out of Colorado, very tech friendly. And yes, it's also, we're in the 21st century, and we're happy to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just glad. I've often joked that one of the challenges with real estate, it's still one of the last places and business models that uses paper. So it's like this becomes the challenge. I mean, just the other day, for the first time, I saw a notary where you didn't have to physically be there, and you could actually get something notarized online. So I'm like, awesome. So if we can solve that, and you guys are solving this, it feels like, well, now I can do deals from anywhere, man.
It's pretty sweet. Yeah, I mean, we're just a caveat. I mean, if there's a subscription document, all of that will still be fine. This is more just on moving funds. Yeah. It will be as easy as writing a check or or ACH wiring money from your piggy bank checking account, which is exponentially different than how this industry has acted for the past 50 years.
Got it. So for those that have listened this far and want to find out more about what you guys have going on, what's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you guys?
Sure. So I don't want to scare folks with my last name. We'll be on the call another 30 minutes trying to spell it here. So I'll keep it simple. Dan, D-A-N, at rocketdollar.com. You can also go to rocketdollar.com/cashflow diary. And then, finally, just as a thanks, I know this sometimes it gets pretty deep, and I respect folks listening through here. If it makes sense to sign up, ultimately, I do want to extend, I'm from Philadelphia, so Ben Franklin, Brotherly Love, extend $100 off to your listeners by entering Cashflow Diary 19, as in the year 19, Cashflow Diary 19 for $100 off a Rocket Dollar account.
Excellent. Absolutely appreciate that. Now, as we wind down, I've got a final question for you. There's a number of people who probably have just been introduced to a new concept, or more importantly, they may even think that, oh, I can get my business off the ground now. They started listening in one particular space, and now they're at another spot. They're at what I like to call the precipice of decision. And oftentimes, when we get there, as humans, we have a companion that joins us at the edge of the cliff, and it's usually in the form of a voice, and it's a voice that reminds us of what we can't do, how it didn't work last time. And there's no way that this retirement plan thing is real, because I would have clearly known about it. My financial planner would have said, and, et cetera, et cetera. And for some people, they're related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time it's going to be different. This time they're going to follow through, and they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
Yeah, I would suggest coming to our website, rocketdollar.com/learn, and answering any questions or potential doubts or items of interest on this. As I said, I think education is good. I do feel most folks could, even if you're completely unfamiliar, self-educate to get you 90% plus of the way there in 5 minutes alone from our knowledge base. And then also reach out to myself or our sales team. As I said, we specialize in this niche. We will even give more conservative answers. We never want to put folks in the gray area. And ultimately what we've seen is just hundreds upon hundreds of very happy customers that have made this leap, and they tend to actually refer it out. So, I guess to sum up, it's finally country club cool, or hipster or taco truck cool, whatever you want to call it, to talk about these sort of accounts. I do think it's time to become mainstream. And, just a final point for folks who might be hyper-conservative, just reflect like, hey, this has been out there since the 70s. The likes of the PayPal mafia, Mitt Romney, our presidential candidate. A lot of notable folks have taken advantage of this. So, from that standpoint, it's been proven, it's been around, it's not going anywhere. And as I said, I just think it's this time, the time and place in our country where people have this opportunity.
Excellent. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And I definitely appreciate what you guys are out there doing. Again, anytime someone can make my life easier with what they're doing, I'm interested in that particular product or service in this particular case. And just let me be one of the first to say thanks for taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary, sir.
Awesome, Jay. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means get over to rocketdollar.com/learn. Why? Because, well, you need to know more. And more importantly, many of you know, while listening, you were like, oh, yeah, that's right. I do have that 401k. Where is that? And if you had that question or that thought go through your head, you are exactly the individuals that we've been talking about. So go out there, make something happen with that cash, that capital. It's sitting there idle. It can go do some good for you and the economy. All you got to do is get over to rocketdollar.com, as I said. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.